What if I told you that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes walk among us, invisible to the world, wearing the humble clothes of everyday life? Today's story will challenge everything you think you know about respect, assumptions, and the power of hidden greatness. This is a tale that will make you question every judgment you've ever made based on appearances, and by the end, you'll understand why an entire courtroom stood in reverence for a man that one officer had dismissed as just another troublemaker. Stay with me, because what unfolds in this small courthouse will restore your faith in justice and remind you that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear worn-out cardigans and carry stories that could change the world. Samuel Henderson adjusted his thick-rimmed glasses as he carefully folded his morning newspaper. At 82 years old, Sam had developed a routine that kept him grounded in a world that seemed to spin faster with each passing year. His small apartment above Murphy's hardware store wasn't much to look at. A single bedroom with furniture that had seen better decades. Walls decorated with faded photographs that told stories few people knew. And a kitchen table where he ate his meals alone, watching the world go by through a window that overlooked Main Street. Sam's appearance was unremarkable by most standards. His silver hair was always neatly combed but never styled. His clothes were clean but clearly purchased from discount stores, and he walked with the measured pace of someone who had learned to conserve energy for the battles that truly mattered. To the casual observer, he was just another elderly man trying to stay relevant in a world that had moved on without him. But Sam Henderson carried secrets in his quiet demeanor, secrets that had shaped not just his life, but the lives of countless others. The photographs on his walls weren't just memories, they were testimonies to moments when ordinary people had done extraordinary things. And among those photographs, tucked away in a frame that had lost its shine, was an image that told a story of courage so profound that it had earned him the highest honor his country could bestow. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Sam had his black coffee, read the obituaries first, and prepared for his weekly trip to the VA hospital for his routine checkup. His 1998 Honda Civic wasn't much to look at. The paint had faded from red to a peculiar shade of pink, and the interior showed the wear of nearly 3 decades. But it ran reliably, and that was all Sam needed. Officer Derek Mitchell had been patrolling the streets of Millbrook for exactly 18 months, and in that time he had developed what he considered a keen eye for troublemakers. At 26, Derek possessed the dangerous combination of limited experience and unlimited confidence. He wore his uniform like armor, his badge like a crown, and his authority like a weapon he was eager to use. Derek had grown up in Millbrook's newer subdivision, where the houses were large and the lawns were perfect. His father was a successful insurance executive, his mother was a real estate agent who specialized in luxury properties, and Derek had never known want or struggle. To him, poverty was a choice. Age was an inconvenience, and respect was something that had to be earned through displays of power. That Tuesday morning, Derek was particularly eager to prove himself. His supervisor had mentioned that performance evaluations were coming up, and Derek wanted to make sure his arrest numbers reflected his dedication to law enforcement. He spotted Sam's Honda Civic traveling exactly at the speed limit, staying in the right lane, and following all traffic laws. But something about it bothered Derek. Maybe it was the faded paint, maybe it was the way it looked out of place among the newer vehicles. Derek's opportunity came when he ran the license plate through his system. The registration had expired 3 days earlier, a minor violation that typically resulted in a warning for first-time offenders, especially elderly drivers who might have simply forgotten to renew. But Derek saw it as his chance to exercise authority. He activated his lights and siren, feeling the familiar rush of power as the Honda pulled over to the shoulder. Derek took his time approaching the vehicle, adjusting his sunglasses and straightening his uniform. He had practiced this routine countless times, and he knew that the key to maintaining control was to establish dominance from the first moment of contact. "Good morning, officer," Sam said as Derek approached the driver's side window. "Is there a problem?" Derek looked down at the elderly man with barely concealed disdain. Everything about Sam rubbed him the wrong way. The outdated clothes, the humble demeanor, the car that looked like it belonged in a junkyard. "License and registration," Derek demanded, skipping any pretense of courtesy. Sam reached slowly for his glove compartment, moving deliberately to avoid startling the young officer. "I'm reaching for my registration now, officer. My license is in my wallet." As Sam handed over his documents, Derek's eyes immediately fixed on the expired registration sticker. "Do you realize your registration expired 3 days ago?" "Oh my," Sam said, genuinely surprised. "I honestly didn't realize. I've been dealing with some medical appointments, and it must have slipped my mind. I can take care of it this afternoon if—" "That's not how this works," Derek interrupted. "You're driving an unregistered vehicle. That's a violation of state law." Sam nodded respectfully. "I understand, officer. I take full responsibility. Would you like to see any other identification? I have my military ID if that would help." Derek's expression shifted from impatience to amusement. "Your military ID? What are you, like 80? What war did you fight in, the Spanish-American War?" The words hit Sam like a physical blow, but his expression remained calm. He had faced worse insults than this young officer could imagine, and he had learned long ago that dignity was not something others could take from you. It was something you chose to maintain. "Vietnam," Sam replied quietly. "I served in Vietnam." Derek's laughter was sharp and mocking. "Right. And I suppose you were some kind of hero too? Let me guess, you single-handedly won the war?" Sam reached into his wallet and withdrew a worn military ID card. The plastic was yellowed with age, and the photograph showed a young man in uniform whose eyes held the same quiet strength that Derek was too inexperienced to recognize. "I was just a soldier doing his job," Sam said, offering the ID card. Derek took the card and glanced at it dismissively. "Samuel Henderson, Vietnam veteran," he read aloud in a mocking tone. "Well, Mr. Vietnam hero, your service doesn't give you the right to ignore current laws. In fact, I'm betting this military ID is probably expired too." What Derek didn't notice were the small details that might have changed everything. He didn't see the specific designation on Sam's military ID. He didn't notice the commendation ribbons listed on the back. He didn't pay attention to the unit designation that any knowledgeable person would have recognized as belonging to one of the most decorated companies in Vietnam War history. "You know what?" Derek said, his voice growing louder and attracting the attention of passing motorists. "I'm tired of old-timers like you thinking you deserve special treatment because you claim you served your country 50 years ago. This isn't the good old days anymore. This is the real world, where everybody has to follow the same rules." A small crowd had begun to gather. Some drivers had pulled over to watch the confrontation, and a few pedestrians had stopped on the sidewalk. Derek was aware of the audience, and it only fueled his desire to make an example of Sam. "Step out of the vehicle," Derek commanded. Sam's hands trembled slightly as he unbuckled his seatbelt. "Officer, I don't understand. I'm happy to sign a citation for the expired registration. I don't want any trouble." "You should have thought of that before you decided to play the war hero card," Derek replied. "Step out of the vehicle now." As Sam slowly exited his Honda, his frail frame became even more apparent. He stood about 5 feet 8 inches tall, but age had curved his shoulders and shortened his stride. His hands showed the spots and wrinkles of 8 decades, and his movements were careful and deliberate. Derek towered over him, using his physical presence to intimidate. "You're under arrest for driving with expired registration, disorderly conduct, and failure to comply with a lawful order." "Disorderly conduct?" Sam asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Officer, I've been completely cooperative. I haven't raised my voice or been disrespectful in any way." "Questioning my authority is disorderly conduct," Derek replied, producing his handcuffs. "And trying to use some old military ID to get special treatment is attempting to influence a police officer." The crowd's murmur grew louder. Several people had pulled out their phones and were recording the interaction. Even among the onlookers there was a growing sense that something wasn't right about this arrest. As Derek placed the handcuffs on Sam's wrists, the old man didn't resist. "You have the right to remain silent," Derek began, reciting the Miranda rights with an air of satisfaction. As he led Sam toward the patrol car, Derek couldn't help but feel pleased with himself. But as Derek helped Sam into the back of the patrol car, he missed the look of recognition in the eyes of one of the bystanders, a middle-aged man in a military uniform who had stopped to watch the arrest. The man pulled out his phone and made a call. "Captain Morrison, this is Sergeant Williams. You're not going to believe what I just witnessed. There's an old man being arrested, and I think it might be Samuel Henderson." "Yes, sir. That's Samuel Henderson." The Millbrook County Jail was a modest facility that primarily housed individuals awaiting trial for minor offenses. During the booking process, the desk sergeant, a 20-year veteran named Carl Hoskins, noticed something unusual about Sam's demeanor. Most people brought in on minor charges were either angry, scared, or trying to talk their way out of trouble. Sam was none of these things. "Military service?" Carl asked, reading from the standard booking form. "United States Army, 1965 to 1968, Sam replied. "Vietnam?" "Yes, sir." Carl paused in his typing. His own father had served in Vietnam, and he had grown up hearing stories about the men who had fought there. "What unit?" 173rd Airborne Brigade, 2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry Regiment. Carl's hands stopped moving entirely. Even someone with limited military knowledge knew that the 173rd Airborne had been involved in some of the fiercest fighting of the Vietnam War. The 2nd Battalion had participated in operations that were still studied in military academies around the world. "The Sky Soldiers," Carl said quietly. Sam nodded. "That's right." Carl looked at Sam with new eyes. The 173rd Airborne hadn't been just any unit. They had been elite paratroopers who had volunteered for some of the most dangerous missions of the war. The idea that this gentle old man sitting across from him had once jumped out of airplanes into combat zones seemed almost impossible to believe. After processing Sam, Carl made a decision that would later prove significant. He picked up his phone and called his father. "Dad, it's Carl. I've got a question about Vietnam. You ever hear of a soldier named Samuel Henderson, 173rd Airborne?" The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Carl wondered if the call had been dropped. "Son," his father's voice was barely above a whisper, "where did you hear that name?" "He's in our jail. Got arrested for expired registration and disorderly conduct." "Samuel Henderson is in your jail?" The incredulity in his father's voice was unmistakable. "Carl, you need to listen to me very carefully. Samuel Henderson isn't just any Vietnam veteran. He's one of the most decorated soldiers in American history. He received the Medal of Honor for actions in Vietnam. If he's in your jail, something is very, very wrong." Carl felt his stomach drop. The Medal of Honor was the highest military decoration awarded by the United States government, reserved for acts of valor so extraordinary that they went beyond the call of duty. By Wednesday morning, word of Sam Henderson's arrest had reached some very unexpected ears. The phone call that Sergeant Williams had made from the scene of the arrest had set off a chain reaction that was about to converge on the Millbrook County Courthouse. Captain Morrison had spent Tuesday evening making phone calls of his own. By Wednesday morning, he had confirmed what Williams suspected. The elderly man who had been arrested was indeed Samuel Henderson, Medal of Honor recipient, and one of the most respected veterans in military history. Word had also reached the local VFW post, the American Legion chapter, and the Vietnam Veterans of America group. These organizations represented men and women who understood the significance of Samuel Henderson's service, and they were not going to let one of their own face charges alone. Judge Patricia Williamson arrived at the courthouse at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before her usual time. She had spent most of Tuesday night researching Samuel Henderson's military record, and what she had discovered had kept her awake until well past midnight. The official citation for Samuel Henderson's Medal of Honor told a story that exemplified the very best of human courage under impossible circumstances. During the Battle of Dak To, in November 1967, Henderson's unit had been pinned down by enemy fire in a valley that offered no cover and no escape. When their commanding officer was killed and their radio operator was wounded, Henderson had taken command of the scattered unit and organized a defense that saved the lives of 43 soldiers. Henderson had made 3 separate trips into enemy fire to retrieve wounded soldiers, including one trip where he had carried a soldier with a severed artery more than 200 yards to safety while under constant machine gun fire. When ammunition ran low, Henderson had crawled through enemy lines to reach an abandoned supply depot, returning with enough ammunition to hold their position until reinforcements arrived. The battle had lasted 14 hours. Henderson had been wounded twice, but had refused medical evacuation until every soldier under his command had been accounted for. By 9:00 a.m., the courthouse was filling with an unusual crowd. Veterans from 3 different wars were taking seats in the gallery. Active-duty military personnel, some in uniform and others in civilian clothes, were quietly filing into the courtroom. The local VFW commander had organized a respectful show of support for Henderson. Officer Derek Mitchell arrived at the courthouse at 9:15 a.m., expecting to spend a few minutes testifying about a routine traffic arrest. He was surprised to see the crowd, but he assumed it was probably related to some other case on the docket. Derek had spent the previous evening writing his arrest report, and he was satisfied with how it portrayed his professional handling of a difficult situation. He had emphasized Henderson's attempt to use military service to influence the outcome of the traffic stop. At 9:30 a.m., the bailiff's voice rang out across the courtroom. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Williamson presiding." Judge Williamson entered the courtroom and took her place at the bench. She looked out over the packed gallery and nodded respectfully to the veterans who had come to support Samuel Henderson. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we have several cases on today's docket, but I want to address one case in particular with the gravity it deserves. Bailiff, please bring Mr. Samuel Henderson to the courtroom." As the courtroom door opened and Sam Henderson walked in, accompanied by 2 bailiffs, something extraordinary happened. One by one, every person in military uniform stood up. Then the veterans in civilian clothes rose to their feet. Within seconds, the entire gallery was standing in respect for the elderly man who had spent the night in jail. Judge Williamson also stood. "Mr. Henderson, please approach the bench." Sam walked slowly to the defendant's table, clearly overwhelmed by the show of respect from his fellow veterans. Derek Mitchell, still seated at the prosecutor's table, looked around the courtroom with growing confusion. Why was everyone standing? Why did the judge look so serious? "Mr. Henderson," Judge Williamson said, her voice carrying clearly throughout the silent courtroom, "before we address the charges against you, I want to ask you a question. Are you the Samuel Henderson who served with the 173rd Airborne Brigade in Vietnam?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And are you the Samuel Henderson who received the Medal of Honor for your actions during the Battle of Dak To in November 1967? A murmur went through the courtroom. Derek Mitchell felt his stomach drop as the significance of the judge's question became clear. "I am, Your Honor." Judge Williamson looked directly at Derek Mitchell. "Officer Mitchell, would you please stand?" Derek rose on unsteady legs, his mind racing as he tried to process what he was hearing. Medal of Honor? Samuel Henderson was a Medal of Honor recipient? "Officer Mitchell," Judge Williamson continued, "you arrested Mr. Henderson yesterday for expired vehicle registration, disorderly conduct, and failure to comply with lawful orders. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Derek replied, his voice barely audible. "And according to your report, Mr. Henderson attempted to show you his military ID, which you dismissed as irrelevant. Is that also correct?" Derek's mouth went dry. He looked around the courtroom at the faces of the veterans who were staring at him with expressions ranging from disappointment to anger. "Your Honor, I didn't realize..." You didn't realize what, Officer Mitchell? I didn't realize who he was. Judge Williamson's voice remained calm, but her words carried the weight of absolute authority. Officer Mitchell, Mr. Henderson didn't ask you to recognize who he was. He simply tried to show you identification that would have established his character and credibility. According to your own report, you laughed at him and suggested that his military service was irrelevant. The courtroom was so quiet that Derek could hear his own heartbeat. He looked at Sam Henderson, who was standing with the same quiet dignity he had maintained throughout his arrest and detention. Your Honor, Derek said, his voice cracking slightly, I apologize. I didn't mean any disrespect. Officer Mitchell, Judge Williamson replied, your apology is not owed to me. It's owed to Mr. Henderson, and more importantly, it's owed to every veteran who has served this country with honor. Judge Williamson turned back to Sam. Mr. Henderson, I am dismissing all charges against you. This case should never have been brought to my courtroom, and you should never have spent a night in jail. As Judge Williamson spoke these words, something unprecedented happened in the Millbrook County Courthouse. Colonel Stevens, who had been sitting in the front row, stood up and brought her hand to her forehead in a crisp military salute. Master Sergeant Chen followed suit, then Captain Morrison, then every veteran in the courtroom. Within moments, the entire courtroom was saluting Samuel Henderson, a gesture of respect that transcended rank, branch of service, and generation. Even some of the civilian spectators, who understood the significance of what they were witnessing, had placed their hands over their hearts. Sam Henderson, overwhelmed by the moment, slowly returned the salute. Tears ran down his weathered cheeks as he looked around the courtroom at men and women who understood the true meaning of service and sacrifice. Derek Mitchell remained standing, but he could not salute. He could only stand there and witness the profound respect being shown to a man he had dismissed as just another troublemaker. Judge Williamson allowed the moment to continue for nearly a full minute before she spoke again. Mr. Henderson, on behalf of this court and this community, I want to thank you for your service to our country. The courage you displayed in Vietnam saved lives and exemplified the very best of American military tradition. Sam nodded, still too emotional to speak. Furthermore, Judge Williamson continued, I want to ensure that this incident does not reflect poorly on our law enforcement community as a whole. Most of our officers understand the importance of treating all citizens, especially our veterans, with dignity and respect. She turned to Derek Mitchell. Officer Mitchell, you have some serious reflection to do about your conduct in this matter. I am ordering you to complete 40 hours of community service with veteran organizations, and I am recommending that your department require you to undergo additional training on professional conduct and community relations. Derek nodded, his face flushed with shame and embarrassment. However, Judge Williamson added, I believe that people can learn from their mistakes, and I hope that this experience will make you a better officer and a better person. As the courtroom began to return to normal, Sam Henderson was surrounded by veterans who wanted to shake his hand and thank him for his service. Derek Mitchell stood alone at the prosecutor's table, watching the man he had arrested receive the respect and recognition he had always deserved. It was Master Sergeant Chen who approached Derek first. Officer Mitchell, he said quietly, what happened yesterday doesn't define who you are, but how you respond to it will. Derek looked at the Master Sergeant, then at Sam Henderson, who was graciously accepting congratulations from his fellow veterans. How do I make this right? You start by learning, Chen replied. You learn about the men and women who served before you had the freedom to wear that badge. You learn about sacrifice and humility and respect. And you never, ever make the mistake of assuming that someone's worth is determined by their appearance or their age. As the courtroom emptied, Derek found himself face to face with Sam Henderson. The elderly veteran extended his hand, and Derek shook it, feeling the strength that still remained in those weathered fingers. Mr. Henderson, I owe you an apology that I can never fully express, Derek said. I was wrong about everything. Sam looked at the young officer with the same kindness he had shown during his arrest. "Son, we all make mistakes. The measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes, it's what they do afterward." Derek felt tears forming in his eyes. "How can you forgive me after what I did?" "Because," Sam replied, "forgiveness is what separates us from our enemies. I didn't fight in Vietnam so that I could hold grudges against young men who are trying to serve their community. I fought so that people like you could have the opportunity to learn and grow and become better." The transformation that took place in Derek Mitchell's life following that day in court was as profound as it was necessary. The community service hours he spent at the VFW post opened his eyes to stories of sacrifice and heroism that humbled him to his core. But it was his weekly conversations with Sam Henderson that truly changed Derek's perspective on life and law enforcement. Sam told Derek about the young soldiers who had looked up to him during those terrifying months in Vietnam, and how he had learned that true leadership meant serving others rather than commanding them. He spoke about the letters he still received from families of the soldiers whose lives he had saved, and how those letters reminded him that every person he encountered had someone who loved them deeply. Derek learned that Sam had spent the 15 years since his retirement volunteering at the VA hospital, helping other veterans navigate the complex system of benefits and care. He discovered that Sam had quietly paid for the funerals of 3 homeless veterans who had died without family or resources. He found out that Sam had never once spoken publicly about his Medal of Honor, preferring to let his daily actions speak for his character. The story of what happened in the Millbrook County Courthouse that day spread quickly through the law enforcement community. Derek Mitchell became known as the officer who arrested a Medal of Honor recipient, but he also became known as the officer who used that experience to become a better person. Sam Henderson returned to his quiet life above Murphy's hardware store, but he was no longer invisible to the community. The people of Millbrook had learned that heroes don't always announce themselves, and that respect should be given freely rather than earned through demonstrations of power. Derek completed his community service at the local VFW post, where he learned the stories of men and women who had served their country with honor. He became an advocate for veteran affairs within his department, and he never again made the mistake of judging someone based on their appearance. But most importantly, Derek learned that true authority comes not from the power to arrest or intimidate, but from the respect that is earned through service, humility, and the recognition that every person has a story worth hearing. This story reminds us that respect isn't something that should be withheld until someone proves they deserve it. It's something that should be given freely to every person we encounter. We never know what battles someone has fought or what sacrifices they've made. The elderly man sitting quietly in the corner might be a war hero. The woman struggling with her groceries might be a single mother, working 3 jobs to support her children. The teenager with the unusual haircut might be volunteering at a homeless shelter every weekend. Before you judge someone based on their appearance, their age, or their circumstances, remember Samuel Henderson. Remember that heroes walk among us every day, and they deserve our respect, not because of what they've accomplished, but because they're human beings with dignity and worth. If this story moved you, if it made you think twice about the assumptions you make about people, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this story if it inspired you to treat others with more kindness and respect. Comment below and tell us about a time when someone surprised you by being more than they appeared to be. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power of human dignity and the importance of treating every person we meet as if they might be carrying heroic stories we'll never know.